Good morning from New York City. I know many of you are joining us from different parts of the world. So if it's afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, we're so happy that you would join us today for this webinar for the discussion of this incredibly important topic. I'm coming to you today from New York City from the sidelines of the Commission on Population and Development. If you're not familiar with this commission, perhaps it's not so clear from the name, but this is the commission of the United Nations Population Fund that has the responsibility for looking at issues of sexual and reproductive health rights. And in fact, my role is to serve as the Minister for United Nations Advocacy for the United Church of Christ here to the United Nations. And last year, during the same commission that meets annually, our General Minister and President, Reverend Karen Georgia Thompson, actually met with a number of officials here from the United Nations, and she spoke about our Whole Lives curriculum. Well, the representatives and staff from the UN agencies kept asking questions, and they were quite interested to learn that we, as a faith-based organization, are actually engaged in comprehensive sexuality education. In fact, they were so engaged and interested in the fact that we are doing this and are committed to this work that not only did they stay for the entire meeting, but they missed 30 minutes of their meeting across the street at the United Nations as they continue to engage around our work and background in this area. So we are delighted and so grateful to Amy and to all of you here today that you were joining us to bring your experiences of your work and engagement in this area. The theme of the commission for this year is ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all of all ages. So this is especially appropriate with this curriculum and the work that all of you are doing because that's exactly what we do. And I will just say one other word that about the current reality for this commission and for this work that stems from the U.S. but has global impact. Of course, many of you have heard about the cuts in the United States Agency for International Development, and a lot of those monies affected programs that are connected with the United Nations Population Fund and this work having to do with maternal health and well-being. And of course, we know a number of the restrictions having to do with sexual and reproductive health rights. But I just wanted to say welcome and thank you so much for being here and the context of where my colleague Abigail and I are now in New York. So grateful to have you all. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Donna. I do want to echo a welcome to this Interfaith Comprehensive Faith-Based Sexuality Education Partnerships, Our Whole Lives in the Global South workshop side event for the UN CPD. My name is the Reverend Amy Johnson, and I serve as Minister for Sexuality Education and Justice in the United Church of Christ. I'm joined today by some of my esteemed and favorite colleagues. Dr. Melanie Davis from the Unitarian Universalist Association serves as the Our Whole Lives program manager in that faith organization. Father J.P. Mogeti Heath, who is an Anglican and Lutheran priest, currently serving as priest to the Seafarers Chaplaincy in Malmö, Sweden with Church of Sweden. And Nosim Peter, who is a health and programs project advisor for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania Health and Diaconia Directorate. So we are here today to talk to you about our joint experience working together around our whole lives and some of the ways that we have seen the impact globally. And we are just delighted to be here with you today. And I want to just take a moment to welcome you, to invite you to take a breath. If you are in New York City, I'm sure you are very, very busy, and maybe even wherever you are, You have had a busy morning or day already today. So I invite you to take a breath, to notice where your body is. If you are standing, where your feet are, if you are sitting, where your body is touching the chair or wherever you are, and to just take a moment to arrive with us today. We're going to start out by telling you a little bit about Our Whole Lives. Our Whole Lives is a faith-based, lifespan, inclusive, comprehensive sexuality education program and ministry. It has been an interfaith partnership between the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ for over 25 years. In fact, this year, in 2025, we are celebrating 25 years of Our Whole Lives ministries in our two faith organizations. And at this moment, that feels really huge. It feels really big that both the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association have, for over 2 decades, come together, worked together to create these resources, to involve parents and families, and to have a lifespan of resources, beginning with young children, ages 5 to 7, and going all the way up through people over 50, to learn about our bodies and relationships so that we can honor them, we can realize their sacredness, and we can be in good relationship with each other. The Our Whole Lives ministry involves parents for children, for any of our material that is for people who are under 18 years old in the US. We have parents who are involved at every step of the way. They often want their children or youth to be involved in this program, and they find it comforting that their faith community is offering it and that there are faith materials that go along with it. We have parents give permission for their children to participate in the programs and the ministries. And we also have an orientation for them where they can see all of the materials that their children will be taught. They can ask questions. They can think back to how they learned this information and what they wish might be different for their children moving ahead in their lives. So parents are involved all along the way. Also, Our Whole Lives is based on some values. So I am going to go ahead and share a slide here so you can see that. We have 4 core values, and I often wonder how many meetings and how many years it took 2 different faith organizations to come up with these values. So the first one is self-worth. And I think that all of us as people of faith, and particularly in the Christian context, in the Muslim context, and with the Unitarian Universalist Association, can agree that self-worth is important. We uphold the dignity and worth of every person, and that is core to this work that we do with our whole lives. In addition, we have a value about sexual health. And in addition to that, meaning that we are giving information to people in a developmentally and age-appropriate way about how their bodies work, what their body parts are, how pregnancy occurs, how to keep it from happening, all of those things, how to keep from getting a disease, a sexually transmitted infection. In addition to that, we also are talking about healthy relationships. We're talking about how people communicate with each other. We're talking about consent, that both people decide together what they want to do with their bodies, that it's not one person exerting their power over another person. And we talk about the importance of the information that we share being age and developmentally appropriate. So when we're talking about 5 to 7-year-olds, we're talking about our bodies, how amazing they are, what body parts different people have. We're talking about gender and what kind of messages people get because they're called a boy or a girl. And we're talking about the expansiveness of that and the diversity of families. Those are some of the things that we talk about with 5 to 7-year-olds, in case you're wondering what that is that's developmentally appropriate. And then we go on to add things with older children and youth about puberty and about bodies and relationships in deeper ways. But the sexual health value is much deeper. It includes pregnancy prevention and it includes sexually transmitted infection prevention, but it includes so much more. We also have a value about responsibility. And this value is important because we feel that it is our responsibility as people of faith to come alongside parents and families and to provide information that our youth and families need. We know that this world is often very sexualized and that children and youth, no matter where they are getting messages from lots of places. So we feel that it is important as people of faith and members in faith organizations to come alongside our parents and families and to give them the information that they need to understand. And we believe that that is helpful and not harmful. We also have a value about justice and inclusivity. And this value is about how we, as faith people, people of faith and faith organizations, work towards the justice that our faith leaders are asking us to help create in the world, to help have this world be the one that our beloved people that we follow. As a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and he worked on justice a lot. And so we are working together to provide justice for people, no matter their age, no matter their orientation, no matter their gender, no matter their body size, no matter their culture, no matter their race, no matter their ethnicity, no matter how their body works or doesn't work, no matter their mental health status, all of those things, we believe everyone deserves justice and equal rights and information. And that's what we mean by inclusivity. So those are some of the values that we promote and that we think are really important for you to know, that those are things that go through our whole lives, from its youngest children all the way up through older adults. That is a thread that continues through all the 7 levels of our curriculum. And now Melanie Davis is going to talk with us a little bit about some of the general principles about what is taught and shared.
I just want to backtrack a little bit to say that all of those values, while they are not technically religious values, they are, we call them the OWL values, but they are values that are both of our faith traditions hold dear. And that they are embedded throughout the entire curriculum in subtle and obvious ways, so that when people use our whole lives, they'll say, remember our value of self-worth. Let's bring that into this discussion. Why are we talking about that? So you cannot separate any one of these values from the curriculum. For example, you couldn't say, well, I want to use OWL, but I want to take out all that justice stuff. No, it's embedded throughout, and that's part of the music, as we refer to it, of our whole lives, are these values, and the way that we're encouraging people to treat it. So, so Amy used the term developmentally appropriate, and we use that term because just because somebody is 11 years old, they don't necessarily need to know what's written in textbooks for 11-year-olds. They might be more advanced in terms of puberty, or they might be less advanced in terms of their intellectual development. So we say developmentally appropriate because there is some flexibility. So somebody could take a younger level class if they needed the more fundamental and simpler explanations for that information. We discourage using a younger person and moving them up into an older level because the social development changes a lot. So we do encourage people to think about this holistically as they're using OWL in what's the best way to serve the young people that are using it. So how we introduce this, when we're talking to little kids, we're celebrating, for example, families and how families are made and the many ways families are made. Sometimes there are children who are brought in to a family by two parents. Sometimes there's one parent or grandparents. Sometimes there are guardians. Sometimes there is fertility treatments that are used. And one of the things that we talk about with young children is that babies are conceived with an egg, a sperm, a uterus, and a family that loves them. So it's very basic. And then we encourage parents, as Amy mentioned, we support parents as sexuality educators. We encourage the parents to tell the story of how their family was created. So that's one of the ways that we involve them. When we also do that through continuing lessons at home with at-home materials for the elementary, well, I should say that the children who are in the younger years have take-home materials that they go over with their parents or their guardians or their grandparents to continue those conversations at home. And that really gives a solid foundation of not only the information, but that family's values or their faith values. They can continue that learning. As the age ranges progress, we try to get ahead of, we don't wait until puberty to happen to talk about puberty. We talk about it in advance so that children aren't caught off guard by the changes that their bodies are going through. We talk about how to be a good friend. So when we talk about healthy relationships, it's not always love relationships or sexual relationships, it's friendships and how to be a good family member or community member. So those skills are transferable so that later in life, if they choose to have a romantic or a sexual relationship, they will have those foundational skills. We talk about values a lot. As I said, the OWL values are embedded, but we also encourage some critical thinking about what each person's values are around friendships, relationships, bodies, and decision-making. And again, that's developmentally appropriate, starting from the youngest age. And then those conversations get deeper and richer as people in the program get older. We talk about harassment when something becomes abusive, what to do if something becomes uncomfortable and abusive, how to support friends, how to be a responsible person if you're seeing somebody being bullied. So again, these are good skills for everybody to have. In terms of practicing justice, right? We want people to look out for each other, for their safety and their health and well-being. So that's one of the ways that we incorporate those values and our faith values into this curriculum. And I will say we do that in a faithful way. And we'll talk later in this webinar about how that can be translated to different settings. Amy, would you like to talk about the way we prepare this to be accurate?
Yes, I think that it's really important, especially right now, for us. And, Melanie and I sit in the United States, and there are lots of changes and challenges happening right now, especially regarding sexuality education. And we take great pride in our material being medically accurate information and making sure that we are consulting reliable, scientific, science-based resources for any information that we share. We have that information written by professionals, and then we also have it reviewed. We have it reviewed by professionals and also by different people who will come with a lens for us to make sure that we're being as inclusive and meeting justice issues as much as possible. The other thing that I think is really important and that sets Our Whole Lives apart from some other sexuality education programs, particularly ones that we have seen in some faith-based organizations, is that we do not use any kind of shame or stigma. It's really important for us that we honor people who they say they are, who they know themselves to be, and that we are inclusive of different genders and different ways that people are in relationship with each other. We know from decades of research that shame and stigma can be fatal. We know that when people are feeling so ashamed and so stigmatized, that the suicide rates go really high up. And we know that many people have suicide ideation and attempts who are in particular lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And a lot of that is because of the shame and stigma. And also, unfortunately, sometimes that is perpetuated by our faith communities. So we are trying really hard to give a different kind of message. We also know that sometimes violence is perpetuated against people because they feel like it's important for them to shame and stigmatize others. So in our whole lives, we are doing very, very clearly ministry that does not support that kind of thinking and behavior, that we are being more expansive and inclusive and trying to share the love of our religious people that we follow and the important people that we know who are our religious, our religious people. So Melanie is going to talk a little bit more about another foundational piece of the Our Whole Lives program, and I have another slide to share with you about that. And this is the circles of sexuality to show the expansiveness and the breadth of the different things that we cover.
So this is, Amy, there you go. So this is a model that is pretty widely used in the sexuality education community based on the work of Dr. Dennis Daly and advocatesforyouth.org. But we've made some adaptations to it with permission. It shows how the holistic approach that our whole lives takes. So when we talk about what comprehensive sexuality education is, it's all of these things. So often sexuality education only talks about what's in that lower left-hand corner, being sexual health and reproduction. And that's what our bodies are constituted of, and what the decisions, the healthcare decisions that we make according to our bodies. So that's a very limited way to look at sexuality education. Well, what Our Whole Lives does is look at all of these aspects. So we have sexualization is how we might use our sexuality, or how society might use our sexuality to influence how people feel about themselves and others. So that includes things like rape and incest, harassment, flirting and seduction. Some people will say, well, why is that up there? Everybody likes to flirt, well, it's okay. It's not saying that flirting is bad. It's just saying that when somebody flirts, they're trying to attract somebody, right? But media messages, young people are so strongly influenced by media. And so Our Whole Lives does encourages critical thinking about what people see and how that might affect them. Withholding sex, I always like to clarify, that doesn't mean we can't say no. It means that we don't withhold sex as a power as a trade-off or a power trip over somebody else. Sensuality is how we appreciate our own bodies and other people's bodies, and and it includes how we feel about our bodies, how we feel about touch, fantasy about perhaps sexually or romantically themed things, and how our bodies work in terms of arousal and desire. And then intimacy skills are, when we talked earlier about healthy relationships, these are all the skills that we need to talk about healthy relationships, caring about people, sharing our lives with other people, loving and liking them, risk-taking, not in terms of a dangerous way, but in terms of maybe you're the first person who says, I really like you. And you take that risk that they might not like you back. But we have activities within OWL that help people practice taking those small risks and making decisions about their own boundaries around those kinds of things. And then self-disclosure and trust go hand in hand. Of course, we're not going to disclose things to people we don't trust. But those are skills, as you can see, that everybody needs to be in relationship with everybody around them. And then young people learn how to use those skills throughout their lives. And then sexual identity is who we see ourselves as sexual beings. Sex traits, that's the biological stuff. The chromosomes and our body parts and what happens to us at puberty. Then there's assigned sex at birth, which is when we're born, somebody looks at our bodies and says, this is a male or this is a female. And that may or may not express who we really feel we are, and that would be our gender identity. And our gender expression is how we show the world our gender. And our sexual orientation is who we're attracted to. So you can see how expansive this is. One of the things that OWL does is it talks about the normalcy of whoever we are within this wonderful scope of sexuality. So whoever we see ourselves as a gendered person or as a person who identifies as agender, or however we're oriented, Our Whole Life says that's normal. That's acceptable. There's no shame here. There's no stigma here. We love you. And throughout everything, we're talking about not being an isolationist. We are caring for each other. We're being responsible. You can see on this graphic that all of those things, all of our sexuality is affected by our attitudes, our values, and our feelings. And a lot of those, if you see that scoop along the bottom, our attitudes, values, and feelings are affected by our families, our personal experiences, our culture, our religions, certainly, but also by the things in the greater world, by politics and what we're allowed to do or show of who we are. And certainly there are institutional and scientific aspects to that too. So we don't go so much in Our Whole Lives into this intellectual discussion, but it's important for people who consider using Our Whole Lives to know that that is there and that's where all that comes from. Amy, would you like to talk about the breadth of the curriculum in terms of lifespan?
Yes, thank you so much, Melanie. These are, again, the values in these circles are such an important part of the foundational construction of Our Whole Lives. From our youngest curriculum, which is, like I said earlier, for 5 to 7-year-olds. And then we have a curriculum for 9 to 11 to 12-year-olds that focuses on those relationships, those friendships, and some of the ways to be in good relationship with other people, as well as the amazing amount of body changes that happen during puberty. So all of those things are covered in that. We then have a curriculum for 12 to 14-year-olds, which goes more into in depth about our values. What are our values that we hold personally, and how do those intersect with those 4 values that we talked about earlier that we use in Our Whole Lives? We talk about media, we talk about body image, how do we feel about our bodies? We talk about gender, we talk about puberty again, because some people may not have started puberty in the early area of that age group. We talk about relationships, how healthy are they? We talk about harassment and bullying. We talk about reproduction. We talk about options when someone becomes pregnant, and parenting, what are some decisions people need to make about that? And then once we've talked about all of those things, we also do talk about, as Melanie had mentioned earlier, the harassment and abuse piece, because it's important for us to give information to people about how to get help and to recognize if something's happening to them that shouldn't, or if they know someone that that's happening with as well. We, in this curriculum, a lifespan, as I said, goes all the way up through young adults. We have a curriculum for 15 to 18-year-olds, which again, just kind of bumps everything up a little bit in terms of assuming that they probably have more experience now with some relationships, whether that's romantic and sexual or not. And again, talking about healthy relationships, the bullying and harassment piece, the social media piece, and how that can impact things. So there's lots of activities around all of those as well. We have a curriculum for young adults, which our faith organizations say ages 18 to 35. And that is a wide range, right? There are people who have maybe are not in relationships at that age, all the way through people who have children. And so there are different modules to discuss different types of relationships that people can be in, whether they're long distance relationships or together or casual relationships or committed relationships. Also, continual information about sexual health and consent. Always in all of these levels, we're talking about consent. The adult and the older adult curriculum are also about issues that adults might have. What are some things you might need to do if there's a medical issue, or once you have a family, how does that affect your sexuality? There's all different kinds of issues that health issues, aging, having a relationship maybe after you have been divorced or widowed. And how do you re-engage with relationships after that? So it's very comprehensive, it's thorough, and as you can see, those are some of the different spans of topics that we cover that are related. We also recognize that children and youth are learning about sexuality, whether we're talking about it or not. And so we think that it is healthier to talk about it, and especially to do that in our faith communities with trusted adults who've hopefully been trained in how to do this well. Families are giving messages, whether they're talking about it or not. How kids, children, and youth see how people treat each other and what the expectations are of people in their culture are based on gender. Those are all things that how people show affection with each other. Those are all things that are giving messages about sexuality. I want to show this one other slide and just tell you, this has some pictures on it of some work that we did. That would be we being Nosim and JP, and I did in Africa, in Tanzania and Rwanda, and some of the interfaith work that we did with our dear friend Mohsen Hendricks, who unfortunately was killed earlier this year. He's an imam that did amazing work with us in the global south, and worked with JP in other contexts as well. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and turn this over. We had I want to say a couple things, some of the things that people had told us and shared with us from our work. One person who is one of the religious professionals with us in our first training said, "Oh my goodness, I understand now. How could we possibly expect our adolescents to make good choices if we don't give them the information to do that?" And then another person had shared with us that they understood after being with us how important it was, how important sexuality was, and that it's such an integral part of who we are and who God created us to be, and that we must really care for that. So I'm going to turn this over to JP now and have him share with you a little bit about some of the work that we have done together.
Bless you, Amy, and bless you, Melanie. Thank you for your sharing and your thorough introduction. I just want to say that I was first drawn into the Our Whole Lives program through the shared work on HIV that I had been doing with the United Church of Christ. And through that, I was introduced to the Our Whole Lives curriculum and was trained as a trainer with them. And what really attracted me to Our Whole Lives was that it was not a teach-a-tell model. It was participatory and experiential learning. And that just changed the perspective for me completely, because all through the children, the teenagers, the youth, the adults are given the opportunity to get involved in exercises, games, discussions, all sorts of things that allow them to discover these truths for themselves. And that is what really attracted me to the Our Whole Lives curriculum. Not just the age-appropriate information, not just the fact that it was faith-based, faith-inspired, faith-supported initiative, but that we took every person who walked through the door and became part of this program very seriously, and they became agents of their own learning in this process. When we were looking at some of the contexts that we had in Africa, we had to say that generally speaking, the age of sexual debut in many and most countries in Africa is much lower than it is in places where comprehensive sexuality education was already a built-in part of the education system for young people. And so we knew that this was something that we had to be able to bring to people on the African continent, particularly in the light of the vulnerabilities created around HIV and AIDS. And as a result of that, we really had to look at ways in which allowing people to understand their own body autonomy and self-worth, and ways in which they could make decisions for themselves. And we also understood that from an African perspective, almost all communities are mixed faith. We're not talking about just Christians or just Muslims, and those were the two predominant religions that we know that we encounter in almost all countries, but that most settings were multi-faith. And from that perspective, we had to have material that could be used from a multi-faith perspective. And so Amy, Mohsin, and I worked very hard on working through some of the Our Whole Lives material and putting it in a greater faith context, where we were able to not only expand, but also the Christian messaging, but also include very strong references and support from an Islamic perspective. And the thing that we immediately experienced was how our shared values were intact. There was nothing that we had to take away. Everything was intact. We shared these values, and they were underpinned by our faiths. We also saw, of course, that the Our Whole Lives material had been developed in a particular cultural context. So we would have exercises of, what would you like your pizza to look like? And I had to say, well, you can't get a pizza everywhere in Africa. We might have to look at a different question there. And so we really had to interrogate what is the cultural background, and much of that cultural background dealt with food and the things around the table and the family. So we had to make sure that we were able to change the names, make the names more inclusive, and also to be able to allow the material to reflect the cultural context that we came from. Very interestingly, when we had worked through the material and it went to the evaluators, the one thing that the UNFPA came back to us with was, we don't speak enough about child marriage. Now, I mean, that's not a context which you might think of dealing with very much in Europe or in North America, but it was, and it is, a very significant cultural context that we needed to deal with from an African perspective, and being able to give children the information that they have a right to their own bodily autonomy, and where it is that they can go to seek help if they are forced into a child marriage situation. So I mean, that looks at some of the cultural adaptations that we had to make to this material, not taking anything away, but making sure that it was culturally appropriate. The last thing that we had to deal with was what this is called. And Our Whole Lives worked fine. That was no issue. but it was the fact that this is termed comprehensive sexuality education that was very problematic. And it was problematic because in many contexts, people understood comprehensive sexuality education means you're going to be promoting gay marriage and abortion. That was it. And so we spoke about life and relationship skills. This is the title of the material that we chose within an African context, because our whole lives does deal with life and relationship skills. And so what we tried to do was make sure that it was more culturally appropriate. We do not take away from the material anything that that gives people the information they need to make informed decisions relating to sexuality, relating to pregnancy. It's all still there, but it's dealt with in a cultural context that allows people to work with it in their context. Very early on, it became very clear to us that there was massive fear within the community about using material like this. And it was only when we started training trainers who would be able to work with the communities with this material that we discovered that the fundamental challenge was that they themselves felt completely inadequate to the task because they felt that they didn't have this information for themselves. And so as we were taking them through the material for 5 to 9-year-olds, they were saying, oh my God, why didn't I know this? Why wasn't I given an introduction to this? Why didn't I have the ability to look at things in this way? And it was almost as if we found ourselves in the position that once we had taken them through the initial training, they were then in a position to say, okay, can you now train us? Because now we actually have a basis. We understand why we need to do this. And it was taking that very seriously that we looked at different models of how we might be able to include the parents. And the reason for that is very, very clear. One of the core values underpinning the entire curriculum is that the primary educators in terms of sexual health must be the parents. And so that means that you have to empower the parents to be able to do that where they don't have that fundamental skill for themselves. And so some of the models that we looked at was, for instance, being able to run parallel sessions of the material at the same time with parents and then with the children on the other side, simply so that when they got home, the parents didn't feel that they were going to have questions thrown at them that they had no way of knowing how to deal with. So taking people where they are seriously, helping them understand that their faith in fact supports the fact that they are beautifully and wonderfully created by God, and that the whole of who they are is celebrated by God, and that what we seek to do is give them the ability to share that information fully with their children, and through that help their children to have information that enables them to be in healthy relationships. So I think I'm going to end there for the moment and say the fundamental thing that attracted me here again to the Our Whole Lives program was this participatory learning. And it's fantastic.
Thank you so much, JP. I want to thank you, and it's always a delight to work with you and hear your passion about this. I also want to just back up a moment because I was gracefully informed that I did not show you the correct slide earlier and that you saw our run of show. So I apologize for that. And I wanted to try again because, especially as JP has been talking here, this is the slide that we had hoped to show you with some of us doing the work in Tanzania and also Rwanda. We did some interfaith work, and we also did some work in Sweden as well with some UN folks. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing that and invite Nosim Peter to come and speak with us about her work with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania, which has been really amazing. And she has some information to share with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, JP and Melanie, for the experiences. And I think I am not very far from most of people in my community. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not very far from most of the people in my community where, for some reason, there's a lot of silence around the issues of sexuality. We just not talk about it. So when I first attended our whole life workshop, for me, it was like, okay, so what is going on here? And then I think what came out for me personally as a person is how it changed me, how I looked at myself and how I looked at others. But again, how I understood myself, like now, to be honest, my understanding of me as a person is very different. But also how I understand others, I think that has been so much change. And I know it's because of the engagement in the our whole life workshop that happened in the Lake Zone of Tanzania. So I prepared a few slides. I think Andrea can help me take us. Thank you so much. So can add another slide, please. So just to mention, because I believe Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania might be a new organization to many. So we are faith-based organization, of course, and we are the second largest in Tanzania, but also the second largest Lutheran church globally. We have 28 dioceses across the country with 8.5 million people. Apart from the provision of spiritual services, we also do quite a lot of social services. So we have hospitals and lower health facilities, but also we have education institutions. And through this now we are working with government, but we are also working with other institutions, local and international. Another slide, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. So one of the programs that we have within the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Tanzania, and this we've worked quite a lot with Church of Sweden, is the we call it clinic and community-based sexual reproductive health and right, where we have 4 components. That is family planning, we have youth-friendly services, male involvement and assessment and management of reproductive health issues. And this is because there's a lot of limited knowledge, limited access to services, but also the cultural issues around youth-friendly services, adolescent and youth-seeking sexual reproductive education and services is quite, it has been quite a lot of issue here in Tanzania, but also issues of male involvement and how men are being engaged in reproductive health, of course, as partners, but again, as right holders, that also has been a challenge. But also we have a number of reproductive, cancers of reproductive organs in Tanzania. So our engagement is basically around education and screening and referrals to services. Thank you so much. Another slide, please. Okay, so in 2018 now is where we started the engagement with our whole lives. And we had a workshop in the Lake Zone of Tanzania, engaging 2 of our dioceses. And it was, for the first time, it was a shock to a lot of people. I think we will see later, there were so many people who thought at the beginning, like, this is not our thing. Why are we even here? Why are we talking about this? But again, I think there was a way everybody started to change slowly to a place of like, okay, maybe this is my role, maybe this is what I should do. So it was really a shift in the classroom that was funny and crazy at the same time. But the idea was basically to bring the idea of faith and sexuality in one place. Speaking about the relationship that there is between faith and sexuality, something that most of people had no any idea. They haven't even thought of it at all. So it was one of the very interesting moment and change, that the shift that was happening was so real. And yeah, I love saying funny at the same time. So another slide, please. So one of the very important questions, because as I've said, it was really most of the faith leaders that were engaged had no any idea. I'm sure most of them hadn't even thought of having sexuality and faith in one place. So one of the questions that was very, very important, and it has kept being important in our work, is what is religious about sexuality and how sexuality is a ministry. So this question brought the faith leaders to a place of, going through the scriptures and trying to look into, okay, what is sexuality really in this? Like, what is religious in this? And how is this even a ministry? And I remember most and to present, most of the answers that come from this question is like, so we were created by God, and so the devil hasn't done anything here in between. So we are still the creation that God has created. So it means God created us as sexual beings, as how we are human beings, as how we are, we are spiritual beings. So that has been, something that most of people came out with. But them being the, because here in Tanzania, most of faith leaders, we call them the ambassadors of God himself. So for them, it's a responsibility. I think most of them came to the realization that for me to make sure that people are aware of this, and also that I help as whatever possible to make sure that the information is reaching as many people as possible. Another slide, please. So, okay, I'm sorry. The pictures are just showing the engagement of faith leaders in the work of HIV among children. And it has come, all of this has been a result of such engagement in our whole life workshops. Another slide, please. So yes, there's a lot that we are seeing. There's a lot of change that we are seeing, but one of it is that improved knowledge on matters, for example, the sexual reproductive health matters, and the improved knowledge has helped quite a lot to reduce the issue of stigma, because here, for example, for so many years, if a young girl get pregnant, for example, it's a big shame. It's a big shame. I think taking them through this kind of workshop has helped them to understand more of what happens in the bodies of people as how it happens in their bodies, and also have that, I would love to call it grace of understanding others and the grace of understanding themselves. There's increased capacity of supporting the adolescent. I'm sure some of you, or maybe you don't know, that 70% of our population in Tanzania are actually young people. So it's a big deal here. Young people, it's really a big deal. It's a very, very good people. I mean, big group of people in our population. And there's a lot of HIV prevalence. There's a high HIV prevalence among them. There's issues of teen pregnancies happening. There are issues of cultures and traditions that happens that affect them quite a lot. Speaking of issues like female genital mutilation, speaking of issues such as early marriages and all kind of stuff that affected them quite a lot. So I think engagement of faith leaders has helped them so much to make sure that they help the adolescents and the youth to have the information, but also to help them through the process. Of course, the issue of gender-based violence has been, and it's unfortunate that many issues around gender-based violence are connected with cultures, are connected with traditions. I think the ability to separate this, that this is no longer a culture, this is actually gender-based violence. And also helping them to understand, of course, both spiritual and public, being a spiritual and public health issue has been really, really helpful in them addressing issues of gender-based violence. We speak about, of course, information, speak about issues of advocacy and all facilitation to make sure that the gender-based violence services are being available. But this is very big. The issue of advocacy at the national, at the regional and global platform has been very, very much on our side. And in 2019, if I remember correctly, our presiding bishop in the UN spoke about issues of youth-friendly services, youth reproductive health services. He spoke about issues of support to teen mothers. And for us, that was quite a very big thing because it's something that was not happening then. But at the national level, engaging them with the government, looking into the policies has also been very, very helpful. Another slide, please. Yeah, thank you so much. So what we see among the faith leaders that we have been engaging and not only within our church, but basically the faith leaders that we've been engaged is that shift that I have been speaking about. And I think that shift happened to quite a lot of people. And I have this bishop who told me personally, like, the workshop has really improved my relationship with my family. So you see how sexuality is really a very huge stuff that we talk about. That he talks about it helping him improving the relationship with his own family, his children. I think you see how much that has been helpful. Of course, the confidence because of the knowledge that they've gained, that also is something that has happened, that we see as a change that happened among the church leaders that we have engaged. But just having that, I said when I started that there's a lot of silence around issues of sexuality. And we do not talk about it at home, not at church, not in the mosques, not in schools. So having sexuality education provided in, for example, church platforms, that is really huge. Having the faith leaders, the pastors speaking to young people about issues of sexuality, I think that is really amazing. And it's a very big change that we are seeing in the work that we have been engaged with as ELCT. Another slide, please. I'm not sure if there's anything more. Okay, yes. So these are just the quotations of some of the people that have been engaged. As a faith leader, the training enlightened me and gave me the courage to break the silence. We talked about this. We talked about the silence. In the Chaga society I'm serving, the African culture does not expose or express issues as some are like taboos. Therefore, I'm grateful as the training has equipped me to be significant to the society. That is one. That is Reverend Paris. She's doing a great job. We have another reverend, I guess. Another slide. Thank you. So, okay, this is another reverend. Our youth have the right to education about their own bodies. And for me, that itself was like, wow. They deserve accurate guidance from health professionals and from their spiritual guardians. And here, JP mentioned about having, of course, the major two religion, and those two religion takes up to 97% of the population, for example, in Tanzania. So they have a very, their influence is something else. They have power, they have the people, and having them in this kind of platforms have been very helpful. Our youth are listening to us and they trust us deeply. Let us point them to the life that God desired for them. Let us teach them, teach and support them to have informed decisions about their bodies. That is Reverend Matthew Mtui. He is doing quite a good job. Another slide, please. I'm about to end, I'm sure. Oh, okay. So this is a story and it's a long one, so I'm not going to read it, but I will just take you guys through it. That this is what I was telling you. Like for this one, he thought at the beginning that this is not our responsibility, and it's not our role at all. I began to realize that it is not only my role, but my deep responsibility to understand these issues personally, to help others. And of course, he went on speaking about the groups of young people that he has. And he went on saying that during youth seminars, I start by reading John 10:10. Jesus came that we may have life and have it in abundance. I explained that they're giving them life in full so that they may not perish for lack of understanding. Thank you so much. Another slide. I'm not sure if we have anything else. Oh, okay. I'm not sure if you can play that. It's 3 minutes, or maybe I don't know what we can do. But this is actually what I was saying about our presiding bishop speaking in the UN, responding to the universal periodic review on what was happening in Tanzania by then. So with him, you will see what we talked about, them engaged in the global, in advocacy globally, but you'll also see them being aware of what is happening among young people. So you know that this has been very, very helpful in bringing them to what is really happening in our communities. So thank you so much. Emmy, to you now.
Thank you, Nosim. And I think that if Andrea, if you can put that link maybe into the chat, and then we will put it in the resources so people can watch that video if they would like to. Yeah. My heart is so full at this moment. I'm so grateful to each of you today for sharing this information and taking me back. And I want to say too that our very last training that we did in Tanzania was at the end of February in the year of 2020. And I came home and the world shut down. So we had engaged some of those people, and it's so lovely to know that things are still progressing, because I know there were plans to do all kinds of things and then we weren't able to. So it's lovely to know that. We do have some questions in our Q&A, and so I'd like to take a little bit of time to address those if we can. And the first one is not surprising, which is, as Christians, how do we connect with brothers and sisters in Christ on these topics who interpret scripture differently and promote harmful and hateful narratives? And I think that's really why all of us, the 3 of us who are Christian, and also Melanie, who is here, the Unitarian Universalist Association, we are committed to doing just that. And there are different ways that we can do that. But one of the things that we have done in our trainings JP has done an amazing job, and Mosin helped as well to highlight some of the scripture verses that are used to harm people, and to really deconstruct those and show the actual meanings of some of the words and the ways that they've been interpreted in ways that are promoting harmful narratives, and showing the actual meaning that is quite different in many cases. And won't go into all of them here, but also when the material that we have put together, whether you're in the United States, right now there are 2 ways to get the faith material, because we're in the middle of changing our formats. So traditionally we have Our Whole Lives, which is a secular version, and there's a companion manual called Sexuality in Our Faith that for Christians brings in scripture and prayer and ritual, and has information in each of the workshops about the scripture, and how it's been used, and how we use it in our to promote not having shame and stigma around these topics. And then there's also a Unitarian Universalist section in Sexuality in Our Faith that brings in their values and principles, and in conjunction with each workshop. We're working towards a new format, and we have 2 levels that are now available in this new format. And there is a UCC edition for Christians that you can purchase, that has that material already woven into it, so you don't have to have 2 manuals and go back and forth. There's also a UUA edition and just a secular edition. So those are some of the ways, and I think that it's important for us as Christians to do our homework and to understand some of the ways that those scriptures have been used. I would recommend a few things. There's an amazing book called Love, Lost in Translation. And JP, I'm going to ask you if you can pop the names of some of your books, your series that you wrote in the chat, because those are also amazing. And there's a new documentary. There's a lot, but I'm just going to name a few of these things. There's also a new documentary out called 1946. And in this documentary, these people follow the story of when the word homosexuality was first used in any translation of the Bible, and that was in the year 1946. And they make a very good case for the fact that it was a mistranslation, and that it has been scooped up and used in a number of translations now in order to harm and stigmatize people. So I highly recommend that documentary. It's very informative. So I think it's important for us, especially as Christians, and especially if we come from a tradition of Christianity that has said that things are shameful and stigmatized or immoral or harmful, that we look deeply into those scriptures and understand that there may be another way to look at that, and how can we promote the sacredness, and even so the fundamental value of self-worth, and of our responsibility as people of faith to care for one another, to love one another, to give information that is helpful to help people understand their bodies and relationships.
I'd like to lift up some really creative work that Amy did with the kindergarten, or the edition for like kids around 5 through 6. Because there wasn't a children's Bible that wasn't, that had illustrations that were sort of child friendly. And so Amy selected certain stories that followed some of the themes of the content in the Our Whole Lives curriculum, and had them illustrated and retold in a child-friendly way. And the illustrations are just delightful. And I'm wondering, Amy, if you could maybe list off a couple of the stories that you selected for inclusion.
Oh, okay. Wow. On the spot here. I will say that I worked with a couple of people. Our illustrator was amazing, Ripley Bennett, and a biblical scholar who specializes in gender and sexuality, and also in children's ministry, and that's Reverend Dr. Laurel Kepf. at McCormick University, and she is one of our Whole Lives trainers. And she did a beautiful story about Naomi and Ruth and how families change over time. And so that was lovely. And the illustrations are a montage of the family changing. She also, when we were talking about babies coming into families, she retold a story about Mary and Elizabeth. And there's a beautiful illustration of Mary going to see Elizabeth. The other thing about these illustrations in it's called our K1 curriculum, but it's for 5 to 7-year-olds, is that I was really important to me that it decenter whiteness in the Bible. And so absolutely none of the illustrations are of white people. They're all people of color, people of African descent, and people of Middle Eastern descent in that, and they're just gorgeous. So I invite you to check that out. Thank you, Melanie. Another question that we have is cultural sensitivity and age-appropriate considerations. They're saying that's really important, and that parents need to be provided the information. This is a question about how to work, because there's a tension between UN bodies like UNFPA and that people are feeling like parental rights are circumvented because information is shared in schools without necessarily any parent permission and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's one of the reasons that we're here, is to promote this type of education, which is involving parents and involving faith communities and coming together to provide this information, and not doing it in a way that leaves anybody out. And I would also say that the Our Whole Lives way, so for instance, JP talked earlier about child marriage. So one of the things that when we got the feedback, we really talked deeply about what we were going to do about that, because we feel strongly, and I will own this, I felt very strongly that it was not appropriate to make the children have to advocate to not be in a child marriage, because they don't have the power. And it's unlikely that they're going to be able to change that. So what we did was we did what we often do in Our Whole Lives, which is to have a critical thinking scenario. And it was the same around female genital mutilation, and there were a couple other issues where we're saying, this is something that you've heard about, or this is something that you're afraid is going to happen to a friend. So we're giving it a little bit more distance, and then saying, who can you talk to about it? Who are the adults that you can go to and talk about this with? Because the adults are the ones that have the power and the agency to do anything about that. So we felt really strongly that we needed to keep the integrity of how we address those kinds of serious and controversial issues within the way that we do that with Our Whole Lives. And that's one of the ways that we did it. We are not going against the UN. Here we are at a UN event. We are not against the UN. However, we do have some different ways of providing sexuality education, and even comprehensive sexuality education, that involve faith communities than some of the other agencies have done. So this is another way. This is another way that we offer to you, and that we have engaged with some UN folks. We did that in Sweden. JP, it was UNFPA at that point, was it not, in Sweden? Yes. To say, here's another way that we offer and that is available. I hope that addressed the question. I know there are
I'd like to add that Our Whole Lives never tells people what to do, except for consent. Consent is a paramount value that we teach from little kids, allowing people to hug them or not hug them, up until the older adults, when we talk about the odds that caregivers might abuse somebody or witness abuse. So we talk about that all the way through. But other than that, we're not promoting masturbation. We're not promoting teen pregnancy or not teen pregnancy. We're just providing information and opportunities for people to think through issues that they may have to deal with at some point in their lives. So, and then when you wrap it in the faith values, as Amy said, when you really learn deeply and dig into the faith values, you can accompany that information with the faith messaging. I also wanted to say when we orient parents and guardians or caregivers to this material, it's not just saying, here's what's in workshop 5. We focus more actually on how did you learn about sexuality and how do you want your children to learn about it? What kinds of messages did you receive that perhaps made you feel good about yourself or perhaps caused harm because you didn't feel good about your body or your sexuality or your identity? And then we take them through activities that really help those adults think through the way that they want the children in their lives to learn about this material. And then, of course, they do get a chance to see everything that their children are going to see. But I think it's important to know that it's completely transparent in terms of what the materials are and the way the materials will be introduced to their children.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Melanie. And I think like all of us have said that in one way or another today too, because I'm thinking about JP talking about how the people in the training and Nosim as well, like thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't get this, right? I didn't get this, and that those feelings that we all need to process when we realize there's another way, there's a healthier way, there's a way that's fun and that is connecting and that is involved with, and that our faith is supportive of, that we can talk about these things. And that is so healing. It is so healing for people. And in our whole lives, many times when we're saying, as Melanie said, we're not promoting any certain behavior, but we're saying, who can you go and talk to about this? So in many cases, that would be their parents. And then parents have the opportunity to say, this is what we believe in our family about that. This is what is important to us, and here's why. So that there are more conversations happening and more connection. And it sounds to me, from what Nosim has shared as well, that that this is emboldening people to speak out about it and to bring this message into more and more contexts, which is just really lovely to hear. So I think those are the questions that are in the Q&A. I will say we have a couple more minutes, so I'm just going to say there are some other questions that we often get. People often ask us, what does sexuality have to do with faith? So I hope that this has helped you. And I know that Nosim has provided that lovely question that we do ask in almost every training: what is religious about sexuality and sexuality education, and how is it ministry? And it comes back to that we are created in our Christian faith in the image of God, that we are created as beloved beings, that we have worth, self-worth, and dignity, and that we care for one another in community. And those are, as JP said, those cross faiths. Those are not things that are different in very many faiths, that we are created in love and care for one another. Go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I was going to say, even in Unitarian Universalism, where the central value is love, and if we start from love, then we accept each other and ourselves in our wholeness, and that we care for others and show each other compassion in however we show up in the world. So whatever faith tradition you come from, whoever's watching this, you can put your own spin, your own faith spin on this material, because it's flexible in terms of, as long as your faith recognizes the OWL values of self-worth, responsibility, sexual health, justice, and inclusivity, you can make it work.
The other question that some of us had hoped that we might address today was what kind of impact does the current United States administration have on this? And it's huge. It's huge. There are many organizations that are losing funding, and I know that Tanzania has been impacted quite a bit by loss of funding and has had to I think you said close some programs that are gone that care for children affected by HIV. And so that is one story. There are thousands of stories about that. One of the, I think this is a moment for us, at least still, where being part of a faith community matters. And that we have the ability in our faith communities, because we are not attached to governmental funding in the United States, to offer this kind of ministry and to be community together and to build that. And the impact is huge worldwide by this administration and what the funding that they're cutting, and the aid workers that they are cutting, and the narratives that they are spinning about gender and about health care and all kinds of different topics. We, Melanie and I, and Donna, who are here, and our United States representatives, are working hard in our contexts for what that is worth. There are many, many people who are speaking out and doing what we can. And for some people, what that means is to just quietly run in our Whole Lives program in their local church. Because doing this work and this ministry can be done by small groups of people in local contexts. And that, as you have seen, I think, from all of us speaking today, can really matter and can really change the context. I want to invite JP, Nosim, do you have any final things you'd like to share with us today before we ask Donna to wrap us up and let the folks get to their next thing they need to be at?
I recently saw something, Amy, that just said long before we had executive orders, we had the executive order that says you are beautifully and wonderfully created by God, and nobody will ever take that from you.
Thank you, JP. It is in the part of the world where I am, it is spring right now, and I was walking the other day and thinking, I am so glad that no executive order can cancel spring. It cannot be deported, it cannot be imprisoned, it cannot be taken away, because Creator created it. Nosim, any final words? Oh dear, I think she may have frozen. Oh, there she is.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, my internet is not one of the best. So I think what is happening is taking us back to the importance of families and the importance, as you've said, Amy, the importance of faith communities in of course, from very, very from families to what is happening in the world. So I think this is just calling us to like go back and look into the families and see how we are supporting families, how we are making sure that families are safe. But again, kindness, I think we need more kindness, we need more grace. I don't know if I have this here right now. Yes, be grace. I have it here. I think it's high time that we really try to be a brother and a sister and a friend to someone. And so yeah, so it's taking us back to families. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Melanie, any last words?
I just am so proud of the work that you have done internationally, and to lift up that model we're actually starting to use more in the United States, of congregations and churches who have OWL programs opening their doors to the community and offering OWL to a greater number of people who couldn't necessarily get it in their own schools. And so that I would just encourage people to think about collaboration. You don't have to do this alone. You can create partnerships to make OWL work in your setting.
And feel free to reach out to us with questions following this. I'll put our emails in the chat again. Donna, will you close us out?
I want to thank you all so much for being with us today, sharing your experiences from different contexts and places in the world. I mean, I think one thing for me that was so clear and what you all have articulated so well is that education of this sort, information has to be culturally relevant. So to hear different ways that you've adapted that and done that is especially helpful. You know, our comments, yes, you are wonderfully created and made, and that means everyone, everywhere, in all parts of the world. And no one is expendable, no one is excluded. And this comprehensive welcoming all peoples and sharing, I think, is what is so needed in the world today. I think of the work I've done in Nigeria with kidnapping survivors, gender-based violence survivors, and how difficult it is in some cultures and contexts to even share your experience. The stigma about what has happened to you very often can silence those voices. So thank you all for sharing these wonderful examples of how you work in your context and how important that is. I do want to say that within this space in Commission on Population Development here at the United Nations, we do not always hear your type of voices like we've heard today. We hear maybe voices that want to be more closed and not supporting the type of work that you're doing. I do wish that you could see this room. I want to give thanks to my colleagues who are here, who've been listening to the webinar, but also opened this space to us from both ACT Alliance, Action by Churches Together. They have welcomed us here. We are a member, as UCC, a member of ACT Alliance. I believe you all are in more than 120 countries worldwide. They've been at the forefront of doing this work for many, many years in many contexts. And so we're grateful to be with them, also with the World Council of Churches. Some of you may have heard of the Thursdays in Black initiative and their work around obstetric fistula. So unfortunately, there wasn't time to hear from everyone in the room, but those are some of our colleagues and partners who have joined today and listening to your voices. Again, I appreciate your time and willingness to share from your context, your time zones, and make the effort to be here today. We believe, and I hope that I'm speaking for all of us here in the webinar and participating, that faith communities should be a place where we address any issue in our lives. And certainly our sexual and reproductive health rights and reproductive justice must be a part of that. So thank you for giving us this wonderful model of how you're doing it. We appreciate your time, and may we all be encouraged by one another as we move forward in the work for justice in this world today. I have to say this before we close. I just want to have the recognition of girls and children, women, people in this world today who are affected in areas of conflict. And we know that rape can and is often used as a weapon of war. our brothers and sisters who are in conflict situations in ways that utilize their gender and sexuality in ways that we would never hope or expect. So remembering them also in our prayers. Amy, thank you for all your work with this, for your organization, and I will give this back to you for any final word.
Friends, I wish you a wonderful day, and remember, as JP said, the original executive order that you are beautifully and wonderfully made, and no one can take that from you. Go in peace.